So, as I mentioned it, this dissertation, this conference, is called Challenges of Constitutionalism, Democracy, and Legal Culture in the First 100 Days of the Trump-Vance Musk administration. And see that it's in quotation. And why is in that quotation? Because of this interesting person that is Elon Musk, okay? He's part of the administration or not. That's one of the points. We'll talk about separation of powers, judicial review, and also space exploration and AI. I believe. Okay. And this comes from the idea that 3 years ago, almost exactly, I was here talking about the idea of constitution in recent Venezuelan history and what we could learn about it. But 3 years later, I'm talking about United States Constitution, and it's weird because we're seeing a lot of changes a few times. Exactly, Donald Trump sworn in for the 20th of January, so the 100 days will be next 30 of this month. And I don't know about you, but I knew that he was going to be the president of the United States right on that attempt. Because people like heroes. And that was a picture that, well, it was the perfect picture, let's call it that way. We like it or not, this happens, and he's in control of the presidency. So, and everybody is thinking, well, let's measure what happens during this first 100 days. Only today, we woke up here in Europe with this news, that Trump signs sweeping new global tariffs on what is called, some people call it the world of tariffs. And we could agree or not, but there are more tariffs imposed to foreign, well, if you're from Europe, from your American products than when they received. So what they did, I don't know if you heard the news this morning, was basically put half of the tariff that other countries charge for American products. So if in Europe it's 20%, what he did was 10%. So it is fair or not, we'll discuss it later. But mainly, and that's the reason of the name of the conference, is Donald Trump and J. Vance are presidents and vice president elected in the United States, but all of a sudden, during the last weeks of the campaign, appeared this guy, an interesting guy, a guy that he must be a genius. I mean, what he does in rocket scientist is interesting. Does apply to politics and running a country? We'll see. He also is part of the administration. We'll see pictures like this. And like few moments in history, we have seen it in the history of the United States. All this comes from, I want to mention this, from this personal campaign I'm doing, that is the right to make a splash, el derecho de hacer ruido, le droit de faire bruit. Because law, I think that we have to see it in a different way. So the agenda, even though we work about world regional context, we will talk about this and the campaign and elections, election, inauguration, executive orders of avalanche, constitution, separation of powers, judicial review, and fundamental rights. Of course, we need to talk about some case law in the United States in order to understand what's going on, what was going on during the past in history, and what could happen in the future. And of course, we have to talk about some really situations like space exploration, artificial intelligence, and other interesting current issues at this moment. And some conclusion. What's the scope and what we want to understand with these reflections more than the class or teaching something? The idea of separation of powers and judicial review today and how they evolved during times, sovereignty and due process, compatibility of public management, and extreme criteria of effectiveness. We have heard what happens with X the company X, and also with the one SpaceX, and also with Tesla, does apply exactly in the public spaces? We don't know. We'll see what happens. Of course, then we will go through considerations and effects in the Venezuelan case, because Venezuela, as I mentioned it, is really related with the history of current situation in the United States. First, let's talk about and see some things about, some graphics about regional context during the campaign and elections. What was the picture during the campaign? Well, they have foreign policies, what we do with migration, with Mexico, that always have been a frontier really tough. But when we see that this expands to Canada border, and then we'll see with the TPS and other situations, what's going on is really alarming for some people. And what happens also with the foreign policies with Ukraine, Russia, and China, or climate. That was the issues during the campaign. Immigration and border issues, I was saying that, crime, public safety and security, economy, inflation, and the idea, and like the motto that he used, make America great again, the famous MAGA. And we'll see that MAGA, it is being used as the justification of many of the policies. All right. And some cultural issues like the free speech and the woke agenda. Those were issues that were managed in order to support the campaign. Then we had some acts previous to the campaign that was, well, the Congress assault. That was a huge issue in politics in general, because when we see this kind of actions happen in the United States, we as students and researchers in this matter, it's an important issue. The Biden-Harris candidatures, that we'll see that in one moment they have the Biden versus Trump, and then came the debate, and this Biden candidate was lost, so he had to change it to Harris. Those were elements that led to a final decision and final vote of, we'll see, of Trump, that won the popular vote and also the electoral vote. We have international issues. We have seen this on TV, and from the perspective of the constitutional and democracy studies are really concerning. I don't know if in the history of international foreign relationships, you just talk directly with another president without having an agenda, and this happens in life, like a show, a talk show. So we don't know if it's a show or if we don't know if it's a foreign policy well driven. And near the continent, what we have in our countries like Mexico or Nicaragua or Cuba or El Salvador, we see a lot of tensions. Okay, or Argentina with Milei. So that was the picture before the votation, right? And of course, coming from Venezuela, I have a broader idea of the situation with this election of Trump in Venezuela. We have things of TPS, temporary protected status. We have the elections also in Venezuela. Right now, we are in a situation of blocking the license of Chevron working in Venezuela. Then the election came, and 2024 is going to be remembered for an electoral year because more than 40 countries had presidential elections. But it doesn't mean, or it didn't mean at all, that we have a democracy year. Many of the elections were not held with transparency or the results that could lead to some more democratic situations. If we see the final votes on election day, November the 5th, we'll see that Harris had 226 votes and versus Trump 312. And we see 21 million votes in one side and 25 million in the other side, Remember that the previous elections that won Trump, he didn't get the popular vote. So he got them both. So that means that we could have a strong election that could lead that, well, he's the president, he can do whatever he wants in that country. So this is inauguration day, January the 20th, and this is from the official page of the White House. America is back. So we'll see that this comes with an entire campaign behind all this. And right at that moment, we'll see some other expanding policies, such Canada, like pretending to be the 51st state in the United States, or the idea of taking Greenland as a part of the United States, or the canal in Panama to trying to recover it for control under the United States. And well, that was considering the idea from the foreign policies. And from the first day, we'll see that almost 40 executive orders were issued. If we go to the page of the Federal Register, when you can see all the executive orders, we'll see that Donald Trump, by the day, that was like 2 or 3 days ago or 4 days ago, if we check right now, it's going to be probably more than that. He has signed 103 executive orders in less than the 100 days of the first moment of the administration. We'll see that Biden, in the entire administration, he signed 162. Donald Trump, during the first period, 220. Barack Obama, 227. So if we can make a projection of the executive orders, we'll see that it's going to be way more than Obama's. If we want to follow up the presidential actions, such presidential actions in general, executive orders, or fact sheets, we'll go. They have a very nice page, the whitehouse.gov. Interesting to follow up, to see what's going on. I'll do it almost daily. I almost get scared to think things. And we'll see the appearance of this guy. I don't know, we don't have any doubt. I don't have any doubt. He's a genius in rocket scientist. No doubt at all. I don't know if that geniusly thinking it will work in a country. Probably. Time will tell. The thing is that he was even here at the Sorbonne. And it is interesting that I'm having some classes here when also he was talking here about climate control. So we'll see that probably it will be interesting to have him here to talk about politics and constitutional law and rule of law. He was here already, so probably we can bring them back. I asked him. He's a very polemic guy. Not before, not today, but before. And he came with this guy, also an interesting person, Javier Milei. I don't know if you have heard about his actions in Argentina. The numbers appears to be in favor of what he's doing, but at the same time, those that are not comfortable with it are going to, I'm not here saying that I'm with him or against, okay? The idea is making our own idea and perception of the situation. So what we're going to see, and it's really interesting, because all this, it is well prepared as a campaign. So the campaign continues, not only to win, but to justify all the actions. Then we'll see things like, well, from the day one, they open the establishing and implementing the President's Department of Government Efficiency, the famous or infamous, depending from the perspective you want to see it, Doge. The Doge, also the name of this cryptocurrency or this meme coin. But at the same time, it's not a brand new agency or department. It was the United States Digital Service that was created before. I think it is not shown here, but it's 2014, if I believe. And one of the first things that Dutch does, or Musk does, is completely dismantling an agency so big because of the projection of the worldwide international. There is a USAID. It happens that I was in Washington during those days. Everything is closed. I mean, they were dismantling also the name of the building and so on. And the justification was to save, well, a lot of money in the name of efficiency. Well, nobody is against efficiency, but efficiency is doing the same things with less resources. It's not doing the things. Of course, many things have to be rethought, reshaped, and nobody is against efficiency. But again, I'm not either against or in favor. The idea is presenting this. Also, I don't know how you took this, the Gulf of America instead of the Gulf of Mexico. Probably few people knows, or people in the agency knows, that Mexico existed before the United States existed as a republic. And the name of America came from Americo Vespuccio, that was, in fact, in Venezuela's shores. So the name of America also had its own history. So this helps to history or not? I'm not in favor, I'm not against. The thing is that we have to go deep into the history and the reason of the things. And they have then the Gulf of America Day. So they have also this promoting and justifying thing. All this, you can see it. It's a nice picture, nice page, the White House page. And then we're coming closer to our fields of study. Pausing foreign corrupt practices, act enforcement to further American economic and national security. Well, it exists in the United States, an act against corruption in getting some businesses abroad, foreign. So with this suspension or this pausing of this act, any company, American company, could lead a transaction or a negotiation in any country without the fear of incurring in corruption according to the American system. Or this is also an important issue, unleashing prosperity through deregulation. What means with deregulation? I'm in favor of deregulation because we have over-regulation in many countries, and many of our countries don't get to the ends to them because the means that our regulations stop us to develop more richness and more prosperity. And then this should alarm us who study constitutional law. Fact sheet: President Donald Trump reigns in government's overreach and begins deconstruction of unconstitutional administrative state. See the names of this. Well, but those are presidential acts. And before going to this conference, I haven't heard this for someone talking about. But only the name of it deserves to study what do you understand as unconstitutional administrative state. I more or less understand what they want to say here. Like this: Inconstitutionality Index. Have you heard that? Haven't you heard that? This comes also from the perspective of Dutch and efficiency, and leads to, well, there are so many regulations and so few acts that any agency can create a regulation that not necessarily pursues the goals they're supposed to be. Regulation after regulation, regulation after regulation, regulation and regulations and regulations, and we are all overwhelmed with regulations. And that happens mostly in our countries. In our countries, in Latin American countries, or Latin countries that come from the history of Spain mostly, we have regulations and regulations, and in Venezuela we have this el ente rector. So we need a special department to rein everything. And how they do it? Not by developing the law, but imposing every time more and more rules. I'm in favor of deregulating and more effectiveness, but how we do it? Well, we'll see they do this. And then also, who's here into the digital economy and cryptocurrencies and so on? Have you studied? Well, one of the things that leads in this administration is using the Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies as a mean to, let's see, propose a new change in digital economy. So we'll see the establishment of a strategic Bitcoin reserve and United States digital asset stockpile. This is true. 3 years ago, I came to talk about cryptocurrencies, and we'll see that we have to study the idea of cryptocurrency beyond if it costs us 10,000 or 100,000. We'll see how it has political and geopolitical effects. This is a huge issue. The perspective and the idea from Netherlands, from Poland, and from Germany is different than we see it from Mexico, from Nicaragua, from Argentina, and from Venezuela. And we'll see why. One of the main issues was, okay, let's deport all the illegals. But who are the illegals? And we'll see some manifestation in favor of mass deportation. And that's going on, that's happening. People that study, and professionals and that study migrations, you have to study this situation. Because in this 21st century, we'll see this, and it's not different than we'll see that happens several years ago, or centuries ago. We'll see, I don't know how many of you have heard about the Tren de Aragua and these mass deportations of Venezuelans towards Salvador and gangs in Salvador. Of course, people from Mexico know exactly what we're talking about, and what's happening in Mexico is not different than, no, it has particularities, but we have the same level. And well, Salvador had this huge special prison for terrorist prison, so they're sending people there without any trials, or supposedly without many trials. And we have this special situation about this Venezuelan gang that is called Tren de Aragua. And Tren de Aragua is such a phenomenon of criminality and gangs that we'll see news like this. NYC, Chicago, Dallas, California, all over New York, all of them. Venezuelan Tren de Aragua, Venezuelan Tren de Aragua. There is a recent book written by Rona Rizquez, which is from Venezuela. I haven't talked to her, but I received this book. It's in Spanish. I can send it to you because it's interesting to know what's going on. It's so important, or the effect is so huge of the Tren de Aragua, that invocation of the Alien Enemies Act regarding the invasion of the United States by the Tren de Aragua. Watch this. So, the Tren de Aragua is such a crime effect or a phenomenon that even has a special presidential action against it. Invocation of the Alien Enemies Act regarding the invasion of the United States by the Tren de Aragua. Not by another state, by the Tren de Aragua. But this doesn't end in here. You know when this Alien Enemies Act was delivered? In 1798. During when? You know when? Well, it wasn't during the independence of the United States. It was during the quasi-war within United States and France. And it was not timed, it wasn't not time limited. So that's why President Trump invokes this special act. It was signed, and it's interesting the names that we'll see here, by second President of the United States, John Adams. And this case probably has been undercover. Once you see it everywhere. You see that even in the press from France, mentions the Tren de Aragua, the Gang Venezuelan, the Guardian. And what happens is that all these criminals, because I believe there are many, many criminals, but many others don't, because Venezuela, we'll see then a picture of it, we have almost 600,000 persons with TPS status in the United States. And it was suspended. So few Venezuelans with TPS suspended could be put in custody and sent to El Salvador or sent directly to Venezuela. And what happens? This judge, a federal judge, delivers an order to stop this massive deportations. And we'll see, and every day we'll see news like this. Okay, you don't deport millions of people, but at the same time, people is scared and try to escape from the United States. And they'll come to Europe, to France, to Madrid, to Italy, and some other countries, probably Mexico, who knows. So this have an effect, not only in the United States and Venezuela, but worldwide. Also, we'll see people's news like this, that Nazis had more rights than Venezuelan migrants to contest removal, U.S. judge says. This judge, a federal judge, James Boasberg, Chief of Justice of the United States State District Court by the District of Columbia, put this warrant to stop, this order to stop the deportations without trial or without any process. And what did President Trump says, or first Vice President says, judges aren't allowed to control Trump's legitimate power. So I wonder, what's the idea of judicial review, separation of powers? What kind of statements this looks like? So what happens is, well, that President Trump tells the Congress, well, we have to impeach this judge. Well, and the process of impeachment already came. And what happened with this procedure of impeachment is here. You can see it. You download it. I have it. That's the resolution. 2022, the representative allied in favor of this resolution and this impeachment. And mostly, the charges against this federal judge are that he is, Chief Judge Boasberg, in violation of his oath office, did knowing and willfully use his judicial position to advance political gain while interfering with President's constitutional prerogative and enforcement of rule of law. And then Chief Judge Boasberg required President Trump to turn around planes in midair and had aliens associated with Tren de Aragua, born in Venezuela, this gang, a designated foreign terrorist organization. Chief Boasberg has prevented President Trump from removing aliens associated and so on. And this resolution mentions specifically this decision, Ludek versus Watkins, from June 21st, 1948. You know what this case is about? Have you heard about this case? It was about this guy who was detained as a foreign alien, enemy alien. Federal judge blocks administration from fast-tracking deportations. Judge extends orders against deportation flights. Deportation to third countries without notice halted by judge. Another decision came by another federal judge, but in this case in Massachusetts, and stopped the deportations, or delivered an order to stop the deportations. 2 days ago, another plane went up. This judge is Brian Murphy. This is Brian Murphy, I have sample of the court order suspending and the deportations. We'll see if he was also in impeachment. The difference is that this order says you can't be deported to another country different than yours, your nationality. So you shouldn't be deported to El Salvador, but instead to Venezuela in this case. And what happens then with this case? Chief Justice Roberts, Chief Justice, the equivalent of the President of the Supreme Court of the United States, rebukes Trump's rhetorics about impeaching judges. Well, we're president, we're the judicial branch, and what happens with the judicial review? And we see expressions like this: we are the federal law. That's the word of a president of the United States. And Trump appeals the deportation case to the Supreme Court. So this means that this John Roberts could make a decision on this case when it comes to the Supreme Court. Here we have John Roberts, Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Justice. This is the current situation, confirmation of the Supreme Court. And this is Trump with Mr. Judge Roberts. So we'll see if there is any pressure of the executive towards the judiciary in this case. Again, where is the separation of power? Again, we'll see President Trump with the entire number of judges in the Supreme Court, and this is more familiar to the idea of lawfare, using the judicial system in general in order to obtain political effects. Are these presidents in the United States similar today than before? Remember this guy? Andrew Jackson was the 7th president of the United States from 1829 to 1837. The previous one, the 6th one, was John Adams Jr., okay? John Quincy Adams. This guy, Andrew Jackson, is known by, and we'll see some case law, well, he was the first president who got attempted. He was attempted for his life. And he's also in the $20. And that's, I think, that the bill that has more currency in issue. But also, he was the one who had these policies of the Indians' removal from the lands. So these deportations, mass deportations, we'll see it in this presidency, the 7th presidency. And another interesting fact is that during the presidency of Andrew Jackson was the days that I always like this guy, Alexis de Tocqueville, was the time that he lived in the United States and he wrote Democracy in America. Take a look at this guy, this Andrew Jackson, because Andrew Jackson is the favorite president of President Trump. So we can see there are some similarities in some stuff here. Now let's talk a little bit about Constitution, separation of power, judicial review, fundamental rights, and some case law. The importance of studying constitutional history is to see the path, to see the general context. And the Constitution of the United States and the United States Constitution, and I see many books. The library is, the bibliothèque is downstairs here. I was seeing they have many books about constitutional law, history in the United States. It's interesting. And we'll see that one of the main means or main sources to study United States constitutional law and history is the case law coming from the Supreme Court. And taking this name of the Big Four, like existed Deloitte, Pricewaterhouse, and so on, I want to talk about the 4 big decisions of John Marshall. There is no one that studies constitutional law that is not aware of Marbury versus Madison from John Marshall. So John Marshall was the first judge, chief office of the Supreme Court, and he has 4 special cases that I want to remember or bring here. The first one, Marbury versus Madison. What is about? Well, the beginning of judicial review. All of us know that before this, it wasn't very clear, that idea that the judge can block and review also executive actions and also legislative acts. Judicial review, and this was specifically the Section 13 of the Judiciary Act of 1789. The second one is interesting. It has to be with the separation of powers, Little versus and others versus Barème. What this was about? It was a case also during the quasi-war between France and United States that orders to seize some American, you suspended the license, like Chevron suspended the license of chips, American chips, having commerce with France. But this was this Danish chip that came from a French port and was detained by this American chip also. So they put this legal action that went to the United States and mentioned it specifically that the responsibility of the commander of that mission in case of acting on behalf of the United States, but against a unconstitutional act. So that means that if you pursue an action, or well, in this case, a mission like the military mission, like the deportation mission, and it's unconstitutional, you are personally liable. So this is interesting because of the liability of the officers. Then we have another case really important, that is McCulloch versus Maryland. And this deals with the second bank of the United States. After the Independence War, we have the first bank of the United States. It finished, it expired by the time. So they take the second bank, and you have these tensions among Hamilton and Jefferson that they wanted to have a central bank. But, Hamilton wanted and Jefferson didn't want it. What happens is that in a case within Maryland and concerning the bank, the Supreme Court mentions that Congress can create the second bank. This is important. Why? Because the expiration of the bank was during the presidency of Andrew Jackson. And what happens is that Andrew Jackson didn't want the second bank. And he mentions that, well, I practically don't care what the Supreme Court says about the constitutionality or not of having the second bank. So this means that his idea of the constitutional law in a direct decision, it doesn't matter to him. Andrew Jackson, we're saying. And what happened? He took all the federal deposits from the second bank of the United States, and the bank just died, expired and died. And has a funny thing, he's in all 20 bills of the United States. And he didn't want a central banking, but right now, those are things that happens in life. Worcester versus Georgia. What happens here? It was also a Supreme Court decision dealing with the situation of the Cherokee Nation and also with separation of power, federal state, tribal sovereignty, and enforcement of judicial decisions by the executive power. Because What we know is that the judicial system doesn't have the way to enforce their own decisions. You need the executive power. And what happens? Well, Andrew Jackson says, well, now let him to enforce it. So he doesn't pay any attention to the decisions of the Supreme Court on constitutionality in this case. Again, we have it here. So we're seeing things probably not more different here than here, considering the times, what different it is. Other decisions. We won't stop in each one of them. This content, you'll have this paper, Myers versus United States. See this, 1926. It's about president's removal powers, executive branch officials without the approval of the state or any other legislative body. This was about if can only the president by will remove any officials. There are some, there's no others. But from this decision on, it begins to narrow that prerogative that has the president. Also, Springer versus Government of Philippines Islands. Again, Supreme Court, May 14, 1928. It has to be about separation of powers in branches. Are different branches of the public powers that they cannot invade their competences. But doesn't mean that there is not a judicial control, a judicial review. Humphreys, Executor versus United States. This is another decision of the Supreme Court that narrows the faculties of the President of the United States. And illimitable power of removal is not possessed by President in respect of officers of the character of those just named. That means that has some particularities. 1971, Citizens to Preserve Overton Park Volpe. When we talk about administrative law, of course, we tend to see directly to the legal culture of France. But this decision tends to give us a scope of administrative law in administrative law. This is another one, very interesting, that it's also the members of the Congress, because it narrows more and more and more the faculties of the president, and says that Congress cannot terminate United States Comptroller General for certain specified reasons, such inefficiency, neglect of duty, or malfeasance. The removal can be only by impeachment. So you need a rule, due process of law. Morrison versus also, again, narrowing the executive functions of executive branch, the decision to dismiss or to remove of officers. Interesting here because we have dissenting votes like Judge Scalia, because he mentions specifically John Marshall's decisions, Marbury versus Madison. So we see the importance of judicial and legal precedents, of court precedents in the formation of the history. The framers of the constitutions and also the Bill of Rights. Then we'll see this really important because SAILA law versus Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And we'll see that we're getting closer in time. And we'll see this friend of us, John Roberts. So John Roberts has a chief office in the Supreme Court, is beginning to have more and more important decisions. This one deals also with the authority of presidents in order to suspend, any office, any other officers, the executive power. President have removal power only inferior officers, and also here there are two situations where president can remove officers. One, when it's a member of the agency similar, that is not part of the executive power, cannot. And the other one, also inferior officers. If not inferior officer, cannot be removed by president. Then again, we have now Donald Trump versus Vance, not Vance the president, but also who's the chief officer? John Roberts. So we'll see, again, Roberts having more and more decisions in this. This was related also to the release or not of Donald Trump's income tax papers. At the end, he presented millions of copies, but we'll see more than the case itself, the situation of the Supreme Court. Another decision, July 1st, 2024, Trump versus United States. Again, John Roberts, chief officer. Absolute presidential immunity from criminal prosecution presumptively extends to all of president's official acts. It is important to mention that when the news were spread that, the president is not liable for anything. Well, it's not liable for presidential official acts. But what if the act exceeds the powers? What if the act creates or generates any damage? That's an interesting thing from the perspective of administrative law. We've seen it yesterday. Well, time to make some reflections. In real sense, U.S. democracy had died. Do we think that democracies have died? It's a new case of democracy, direct democracy. Can we see democracy the same way we saw it 10 years ago, 50 years ago, 200 years ago? How to say democracy? Those are the issues right now. What do we understand the idea of democracy? The Constitution. Can president do anything he likes? Like the absolute monarchies? Are we talking about absolute presidency? Separation of powers. The judicial branch fight against Trump. That's a quote of Democratic Erosion Consortium. And this is important also presentation of this Studies Institute in Germany. That is a professor from Harvard University. And every day we'll see this news. Again, John Roberts. John Roberts. And I remember that some years ago, we had this conversation with Xavier Philippe and John Kane when he talked about Trump, about the new idea of new despotism. Probably he was totally right in that moment. And those are the things that we have to talk. And I want to mention this, I don't know, I was trying to find this author. He went to Mexico several times, Michelangelo Bovero. He talked about elective autocracies. So, like having all the votes, college or popular right, give you the right to be an autocracy. So what we're seeing in many of our countries are more or less, I'm not saying that I'm against or for, this is in order to have our own ideas, we're in favor or we're facing elective autocracies. This is a very interesting book that I translated into English and French, A Grammar of Democracy Against the Government of the Worst. Interesting, I don't know if there is any edition in French or in English. I have it in Spanish, or of course in Italian, there are many. And also we have to think probably situations like we have to read Spin Dictators. The new idea of dictatorships are not those like those before, that was with terror and with violence. It's because of the use of the media, the social medias, the propaganda, the use of marketing, digital marketing. Probably we have to think, what would Machiavelli will think about the prince nowadays? If you'll see it, we'll see many similar things. You're being hate or being loved. That was said by Machiavelli. This has effects, direct effects. This is a rule of law index. We'll see that the United States is not on the top of rule of law. This is last year's index, and we'll see that the United States is in the place 26th. What happens next year or the year after? We'll see it going up. I don't think so. I think it will go down. But we'll see the first places: Denmark, Norway, Finland, Sweden, Germany. Interesting to know what can we have from that legal culture in order to implement it, not in particular spaces or states, but in general, has a general cultural legal idea. But at the other end, we'll see Venezuela, last place of 142 governments, last one. Don't think it's embarrassing, totally embarrassing. That's why my approach here is to realize what's going on in here. Now, there are some subjects I would like to talk to you that is not with the separation of power, but it's real. There are factual, there are phenomena that are going on right now. Space exploration. Again, we have this guy, Elon Musk. Let me tell you one thing, I'll explain it if we have time. Sure, I try to meet Elon Musk. I'll meet him. Right, I'll meet him and I'll have a talk with him. Because we both have been here in France. We both have been here in Panthéon Sorbonne. But we'll talk not about, because I don't know about rocket scientists, but many other things. This was an important issue during the campaign. Did you know that some astronauts were in space for several weeks and months? They're supposed to be a couple days, couple weeks, and they were there 9 months. And they were not rescued during the campaign because of the political effects during the campaign. But after Trump's elections and sworn in, well, they were brought back. And we all know that from the day one, Trump has mentioned that space exploration is an issue in his administration. And this was, I believe, not more than a month ago, than a week ago. We had this presidential action that mentions the importance of exploration, of space exploration. So we have to start exploration. Last year, I wrote this, Professor is mentioned it here. I wrote about from the Carta Magna of 1215 to interplanetary constitutional law and martial constitutionalism. It seems crazy. Of course it seems crazy. But every week we'll see that Mars, it will be a fact. Probably not in matter of having a constitution of Mars, but the idea of expanding the humankind beyond the planet have to make us think the idea of rule of law. Who control the controller? Who control the powers? So, not in order to create a society in Mars, probably, but the idea of understanding. Here, with that QR, you can go and see and read my paper. 2 months ago, we had this summit here in France, February 11th, I believe, I think, where Vice President Vance came here and delivered his first speech, foreign speech, and it was maybe really too tough, too strong against Europe in general, the culture, the legal culture of general. 2 days, 3 days after, he went to Munich to have another speech there. But the idea is that AI is not only to make work, it's not only to make a picture. That's a tool that is having huge effects in economics and geopolitics because of the energy it uses, the water it uses, and we'll see the money it's spending. Again, we'll see how important it is to follow up the White House page in order to see the entire words of Vice President Vance. They were tough, but they were true. Those are the things that we have to talk. We want it or don't want it. We agree or we don't agree. Since also the first week, we'll see projects like this one that is called Stargate, dealing with AI. $500 billion are involved in this project. Huge project. Like the oil, the petroleum, was a huge element for geopolitics. This is going to happen. AI has an instrument of geopolitics. Removing barriers to American leadership in artificial intelligence. Public comment invited on artificial intelligence action plan. The presidency, the administration of Trump, Vance, Musk is go towards that direction, artificial intelligence. And why is that? If we'll see the biggest companies in marketplace, all of them, well, not all of them, there are some others, are data, internet, artificial intelligence connected. The only one dealing with oil, with petroleum, is Aramco. And is, let's see it somewhere, Saudi, number 6. But we'll see Apple, Microsoft, Nvidia, Amazon, Alphabet. Then comes Aramco, Meta, Berkshire Hathaway, that's a diversion, Tesla. All of them are tech companies. So the era of oil is over. The era of oil has a main conflict between the states is over. AI and data is the new oil. Also, this leads us, next week I'll be here in Paris participating in this spring school, How Can Emotionally Intelligent AI Transform Society? And I'm going to present my ideas that are jurisprudence AI, change in a stakeholding in lawmaking and legal theory. AI is going to be a major agent in creating law because we believe and we have this appreciation that the law is created by the states and these special offices and regulators. AI is going to have a new approach towards the legal theory and lawmaking. There's going to be a stakeholding changes in there. To end, again, I'm going to develop the situation of Venezuela related with Donald Trump's administration. And again, I'm going to do it executing my liberté d'expression des enseignants and chercheurs that we talked last week about that. All this I shouldn't be punished because of what I'm saying here, because I'm doing it in a university purpose of research. Venezuela's case issues. Remember that I came here 1 year? Well, I've been following up what's going on in Venezuela. And we could prepare, like I just did with you with this situation about Vance and Trump and Musk. I could talk about challenges of constitutionalism, democracy, and legal culture in the first 100 days of the Nicolás Maduro administration. Also, I put quotation marks, not because I put a name different, but there are people that instead of calling them administration are calling them regime. So people could say Nicolás Maduro regime. We're against or we're in favor, we're studying it in a neutral way. So Venezuela has very complicated issues. Chevron is one of them, other related, but we also have TPS, temporary protected status, TDA, Tren de Aragua, that we saw the importance of this, elections and constituent assembly. They're supposed to call again another constituent assembly in Venezuela. What is the thing about Chevron and Venezuela? Well, the thing is that Chevron, this major company in oil business, the government of Venezuela owes some money, and the government of Biden authorized it to operate in Venezuela. So Chevron recovered some of the money that was owed to them, and in favor, the government/regime could offer open and democratic elections. He didn't comply with that, and well, Biden lost, Trump won, and Trump just cut the license of Chevron. More or less like happens with the quasi-war between United States and France. So what happens is it has direct effects in our economy, because the dollars, the money that went into the country was mainly because of this operation. But what happens? Not only Chevron is not allowed, the license was cut off. Any country that buys petroleum, oil from Venezuela has an interesting or a tariff, a higher tariffs. So a lot of countries that could pay money to Venezuela to buy their oil prefer to do business with the United States and not to Venezuela. So this is going to bring inflation. And this inflation also goes to the people. Okay? We like it, we don't like it, we're expanding, we're talking about in general. So we'll see that also we have another problem within the Guyana territory. We have a dispute situation in Guyana, and in this part of the discussion, we have oil drills in sea, and you have ExxonMobil there. So Venezuela's military army sent some ships there. So we have another tension over there, also related to oil, also related to politics. We continue. TPS. Well, TPS, the government of the United States, the administration, Trump's administration, stopped the renewal of the temporary protection status of people there from different nationalities, but only from Venezuela. The estimate is almost 600,000 Venezuelans. So the estimation is that 7.7 million Venezuelans are from outside the country. It is after the Syrian war, but without formal war, we have more people outside our country. Many of them were not allowed to vote, to this vote that we're talking about. Again, Tren de Aragua, really a phenomenon that has to be studied because of the impact outside, not only in Venezuela, but outside the country. I don't know if probably in Europe could be probably some effects. Again, there's, and remember that we have this situation within Trump and the decisions of the federal judges in the United States. Luckily, Watkins. Remember that I mentioned that this was 1798 Act. Never during that period, we're talking about 1798, was used to deport anyone. The only case that went to the court, Supreme Court in the United States, was this, concerning this law. It was Luedecke versus Watkins. And you know who this Luedecke is in German? How do you pronounce it in German? Luedecke. Luedecke. D'accord. All right. This guy. So imagine. So we're comparing the situation of the Tren de Aragua, of a real situation, we like it or not, that's the case, of this guy who was deported. He was put on detention without any proper due process of law. So, is it the same? Are we talking the same situation when you claim this invasion of the United States by the Tren de Aragua? Are the situations the same? Of course not. Of course not. This has to be taken in consideration in further cases. Okay, because it's specifically mentioned in that resolution of the Congress. The case of Venezuelans elections. We had this election in July 28th last year, and well, in the middle of the night, the Office of Electoral Office said, well, Maduro won again. But they never show up, the votes, the slips. The lawfare, using the idea of lawfare, the regime, the administration, however you want to call it, went to the Supreme Court in order to obtain an act that mentions, that tried to legitimate that supposedly won victory. The numbers are this. Edmundo Gonzalez has 7.4 million votes against 3.3 million. That's huge. That's not a difference that can be only be forgotten and be put under the mat. Observation of the Carter Center that was there also recognizes that according to the polling stations, 7.1 against 3.5. So even though you can see there is a little bit more or less, but none of the official voting systems or the agents can show up the votes. So it remains silent. So like nothing happens. Meanwhile, we'll see what's going on in the United States. So, but Venezuela can't be forgotten about this. Meanwhile, Edmundo is now in Europe, trying to get here. He received the highest prizes. We'll see Maria Corina Machado with Edmundo. Maria Corina is the main opposition leader. And at the same time, we'll see, and I invite you to see, you like it or not, she participated in a podcast with Donald Trump Jr. about interesting issues concerning the current events in Venezuela. And well, she's right now hidden in Venezuela, and Edmundo is out. But it's interesting to get to know the entire idea. I wrote about this situation, Alia Yacta S, Venezuela, July 28th. The die is cast, like mentioned Julio Cesar. An X-ray of a democratic phenomenon. You can download it there. Now we have Venezuelan opposition members under siege under the Argentine embassy. They cut the electricity, the food supplies, the water supplies, they're right there. And nothing happens. American hostages were held in the United States, and they were released by a special envoy, Richard Grenell. And right now, they're calling for a new constituent assembly. And what do we do with the new constitution when you don't believe what is a constitution? When a constitution doesn't have a redirect effect. When the supposedly country that to be an example of the constitution, like the United States, we're seeing what we're seeing. We have to be really critical with ourselves and the situation in general. So what happens is, the idea of constitution, what idea of constitution should we have? Written constitution, unwritten constitution, paper constitution, facade constitution, strong constitution, weak constitution, formal constitution, sham constitutions, autocratic constitution, democratic constitutions, plasticine constitution, constitutional vandalism, and junk constitutionalism. Many of our countries, the constitution is junk. What's the direct effect? It's not a misrespect of constitutionalism. Constitutionalism has to be back to what it is, to protect citizens against the power. And who's the one that exercises most power? The states. Conclusions, if there are any. Remember, this was the scope. I wasn't going to develop it one by one. What I wanted is that you in present, or those that see it in Zoom or right after this video, talk about this by our own, to be critical. I'm really honored to be here. I don't know if you knew that Theodore Roosevelt was here at the Sorbonne also. It was in 1910, April 21st, I believe, or 23rd. He delivered this speech. I recommended you to read it. I read it two nights ago in order to see how it fits to what I'm saying here. And I want you to be out of here with more questions than answers, and the profound revision of constitutional institutions such constitutional justice, constitutional courts, rule of law, separation of powers, judicial review, judiciary independency, due process of law, and probably we're talking about the John's legacy, two John's legacy. John Marshall, we see the legacy of John Marshall, and probably John Roberts is beginning his legacy. We expect, we hope, that in 50 years, 100 years, 200 years, we could read John Roberts' decisions and read it the same way we read right now Marshall's decisions. I think I would like to meet Roberts, but now we have these computer things. We can make a follow-up of his decisions. He's going to have the opportunity to make huge decisions, not only for the United States, but for the world, for constitutionalism. We have to encourage constitutional legal culture beyond the scholars. This has to be out of these classrooms. People have to understand what is a constitution. We have to be free of constitutional and legal populism, free of plasticism, sauvage constitution, like you mentioned it in your presentation in Texas 2 years ago, 3 years. Constitutional vandalism. We have to get rid of constitutional vandalism or junk constitutionalism. We have to avoid over-regulation. We have to avoid, or probably going towards deregulation or over-compliance. Everything now is compliance. It's a mode right now. The compliance this, compliance that. We follow up. We have to decompliance. I don't know if that word exists, but I think we understand it. Abusive intrusion of regulation in free and private initiatives that create prosperity while protecting fundamental rights. Over-regulations, what they do is they block prosperity and initiatives. We have cases, really tough cases of depredatory and exploitative taxing practices. Taxing, overtaxing. Do you think that in 10 years we're going to have less taxes? Probably some public spending and social progress may drive to populism and condemning future generations. How much taxes did our parents, grandparents, great-grandparents paid? What about our kids, our grandsons, our future generations? We have to think probably in illegal normative systems. What's illegal? Normative systems that don't depend on legislation. Legislation has a politic products of the states. We have to think about civil society. Nowadays, global, digital, civil societies. We have to talk, yes, I had this idea before Dodge. I had this idea of agencies or departments of legal transformation. We have to talk about transparency, and I mentioned it, efficiency. Yes, efficiency. AI, of course, AI can effectively help us to be more efficient, but we must be aware of the risk while implementing. We can't do it. We're against, or contrary. I'm against many things of this administration, but in favor of another things, probably the means or probably the ends, what the scopes. Okay? Accountability, liability of officials for abuse of power. We'll see it yesterday, but also we can have this case law of the United States to see if there is any, that there are. Legisprudence and AI, that's the issues I'll address next week. Again, I mentioned it, that I wanted to meet this guy. So I went into the X, I paid my subscription. I don't have it free because I believe he's not going to read. Someone has the free subscription. I pay my subscription. I put his name on it. He hasn't written back. So, in this, I also mentioning him. He didn't write me back. Elon Musk, he didn't write me back. So I wrote him a letter. I sent this letter, certified letter. I sent it from Curacao, that I had this case in Curacao. This letter made all over the world. It went to Dubai, United States, went to Malaysia, and right now is somewhere in Venezuela. I haven't received it back. But the thing is, I sent a certified letter to Mr. Elon Musk. I haven't received it. Remember that I told you that I was in Washington? I was 2 blocks from here, from where he's supposed to be staying, or they're saying. I had this letter to deliver in the mailbox, not mailbox allowed. The Secret Service guys didn't allow me to go further than the certain thing. So I had to send him another certified letter. There is the receipt, and well, they haven't arrived already. Well, I hope, I'm telling you, once I'm going to meet that guy, we're going to talk about efficiency. And talking about efficiency, I want to end up with this. The good citizen in a republic must first of all be able to hold his own. He's not good citizen unless he has the ability which will make him work hard and which at need will make him fight hard. The good citizen is not a good citizen unless he's an efficient citizen. But if a man's efficiency is not guided and regulated by a moral sense, then the more efficient he is, the worse he is, the more dangerous to the body politic. Theodore Roosevelt, 21st of April, 1910. Merci à vous. Thank you. I'm here in order to any questions, any